New York State Attorney General Letitia James has a new filing in her case involving the New York State Attorney General versus Donald Trump and his children. What is the new filing? The people are ready. That's what I used to say when I was a prosecutor and I was ready to go to trial. You stay on the record, the people are ready. But this is the New York State Attorney General. And what is she saying? She's saying the people of the state of New York are ready for trial. This is before Judge Arthur Engoron. And what she did was she provided a notice, and she filed this notice with the court. It's a notice of a trial without a jury. It's a form that gets filed with the court. I'm going to read from it. It's note of issue, Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of New York, the people of the State of New York, by Letitia James, Attorney General of the State of New York, plaintiff, against Donald Trump et al. The notice for trial is for a trial without a jury. That means it's going to be a bench trial, which means Judge Arthur Engoron is going to be the finder of fact and the decider. He's going to say whether or not he finds that there was more than enough evidence, so more likely than not, the preponderance of the evidence, which is the standard in a civil case, to find Donald Trump and his two sons, to find them liable under the claims that Letitia James has brought against them. So this is what she brought was Executive Law Section 63, parentheses 12, which is a fraud claim that she's bringing against him. She served this on the lawyers for Donald Trump and the others. It was Alina Habba, and there are other lawyers as well who are involved in this, but Alina Habba was the one that was served with this. And the amount demanded is at least $250 million. That's what Attorney General Letitia James is demanding, at least $250 million. And what other relief, it says, are you asking for? And she writes, permanent injunction and such other relief set forth in the complaint. And the permanent injunction she's seeking is so that they can never do business in the state of New York again. This was filed this week. And the next page is Certificate of Readiness for Trial. What she checked off is that all pleadings are served and all discovery known to be necessary has been completed. Those are two things that need to happen before you can actually go straight to trial and be ready for trial. All the other things that are on this list, the bill of particulars, physical examinations, medical reports, appraisal reports, and compliance with rules in matrimonial actions, all checked the box not required. So she says there's no outstanding requests for discovery. There's been a reasonable opportunity to complete the foregoing proceedings. There has been compliance with any order issued regarding any pre-calendar rules, and the case is ready for trial. Signed, Letitia James, Attorney General for the State of New York. So that's what the filing was. And let's talk about what this case is. If you recall, this was a case that was filed in September of 2022 against members of the Trump family for orchestrating this extensive fraud scheme regarding the property valuations of all of their various properties around New York and their financial documents, right? This was the companion case to the Alvin Bragg current pending investigation, but not yet indicted case, where they were working together in parallel, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg on the criminal side, along with Letitia James on the civil side, kind of investigating the same thing, but from different perspectives. And what they were saying was, for example, lying about things like, oh, my apartment's 10,000 square feet and worth $10 million. When objectively you could go to the apartment and say, well, it's actually 2,500 square feet and it's only worth $2 million, right? And things like that, where if you're going to take out a loan and it suits you to have your assets, your golf courses, your skating rinks, your buildings, your apartments, all the various things that Donald Trump owns around New York State, you want them for purposes of taking out loans or inflating your own personal assets, you want them to be worth more. And so he would jack up the prices there to things that are both objectively, things like square footage, things that you can objectively measure. And he would lie about that. And they would also exaggerate the value of the assets that are not within any realm of acceptable in the profession, apparently, according to General James. I love calling attorneys general, just calling them general. Isn't that cool? I'm going to call her General James from now on. Anyway, so basically, the other thing he does is he devalues his assets when that suits him, right? So let's say for tax purposes, he doesn't want to pay a lot of taxes on something, and the more something's worth, the more taxes you'll pay. So he will say, oh, that apartment, it needs a lot of work. It's, kind of run down. It needs new HVAC and other things. And so it's not really worth that much. And so we're going to devalue it. And so for tax purposes, that same apartment that he valued at $10 million would now be worth $1 million, right? And so both things can't be true. And so General James is saying that he and his family have perpetrated fraud and stolen money from the taxpayers of the state of New York and falsified business records all over the place. Now, don't forget, this is the case that Cy Vance was investigating when he was district attorney, and he'd brought in a special prosecutor named Mark Pomerantz and the general counsel of the office, Carrie Dunn. They were working on this case together. And Cy Vance did not authorize an indictment in the case because it was nearing the end of his term, and he didn't think it was appropriate to bring an indictment like this. At the time, it would have been the first ever indictment against a former president. Of course, now, what are we on, indictment number 3 or 4 against him? So, at this point, it's not so novel anymore, but at the time, no one had done it before. And Cy Vance didn't want to make that decision essentially for Alvin Bragg. If you recall, Cy Vance had already filed an indictment against the Trump Organization and Alan Weisselberg. And he handed that case over as an indictment to Alvin Bragg. And then Alvin Bragg took that to trial, got a 17-count conviction, and that case is completed. But there was also a pending criminal investigation, a couple of them, that Cy Vance handed over to Alvin Bragg to make the determination about whether or not the cases were ready to be indicted. One of them was this companion criminal case that was being investigated and prosecuted by, as I said, Mark Pomerantz, the special prosecutor, and Carrie Dunn, as well as the Stormy Daniels hush money payment investigation. Alvin Bragg looked at both cases. He didn't feel comfortable in his first few weeks in office to go straight into the grand jury on this particular case, and he wanted to develop more evidence. Mark Pomerantz and Carrie Dunn did not like that answer, and so they both resigned. Mark Pomerantz resigned quite noisily by leaking his resignation letter and then writing a book telling tales out of school and criticizing the office, as well as criticizing some of the hardworking men and women who are public servants at the Manhattan DA's office, which, basically claiming that he didn't quite respect their decision-making, putting it mildly. Anyhow, they left the case kind of hanging out there. Alvin Bragg didn't say he wasn't going to go forward. What he said was he wanted to continue to develop more evidence in that case. And in the meantime, he brought the Stormy Daniels hush money election interference case, right? The election fraud case, I should say. He brought that case. Why did he bring that case instead of this other case? I think part for 2 reasons. Number one, that case, he apparently developed more corroboration and evidence in that case, number one. Number two, that was a quite significant case to bring because it does involve a sitting president while he was president of the United States writing fake or false checks, fraudulent checks to Michael Cohen and disguising these campaign donations, frankly, to himself as legal bills. And so he brought that case. It is an important case, and that case is scheduled for trial to go to trial in front of Judge Juan Merchan in March of 2024. Let's see if it does go or if it gets pushed and Jack Smith's, one of Jack Smith's indictments goes in its place. We shall see. But what was it that Alvin Bragg wanted to develop in his criminal case? That's the companion case to the General James case that we just talked about. That's ready for trial, and I think it was a brilliant chess move that he made. Alvin Bragg was not a Manhattan DA prosecutor. He actually, before he became the district attorney, what he was what he spent most of his career doing is working at the Attorney General's office. Right? He worked in the very office that Letitia James now runs as Attorney General, and he was quite high up in that office. And what he knows is something that criminal prosecutors in New York don't typically, how they practice, which is you get to take depositions, right? And you get to take depositions of the parties and of the witnesses. And Donald Trump sat for a deposition in this case in April of 2022, and he took the fifth. Right, he said, "I have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, so I'm not going to answer any questions." 400 times. But what Alvin Bragg did was he knew you could potentially do another attempt at a deposition, and Donald Trump did it. He did it. He finally sat in April of 2023. He sat for a deposition and actually answered the questions. And so now Alvin Bragg has every one of those answers that he could potentially use in his criminal case. So I think that's why he did it, and that's why he waited, and why he wasn't ready to bring the case when he did. But now I think he brought the case that he has. He's going to potentially bring this other case, or just wait and see how it goes. Let General James test the evidence at trial this coming October. It's going to trial October 2nd, and Judge Engoron said this date is set in stone. And if I were Alvin Bragg, I'd watch it carefully. I'd see how the witnesses are doing, and then I would, if it holds up in court, then I'd bring my case next. So that's what's going on here. In this case, stay tuned. October is 2 months away. So this case is going to trial. The people are ready. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo. I love saying that. I used to say that every time I tried a case or stood up in court when I was a prosecutor, and it's just a great feeling because it takes a lot to get ready to go to trial. Trials take a lot of work, especially when you are presenting all of the evidence. So I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Follow me on all the social media places at KFA Legal, and I'm the co-host of Legal AF with Michael Popak and Ben Meiselas. Come watch us every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for watching.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.